They say life's biggest changes come when you least expect them. For me, it happened on a Tuesday in September. Just another perfect autumn day in suburban Connecticut, where all the houses look the same, and all the secrets stay hidden. I was arranging flowers in the crystal vase Victor had bought me for our anniversary. 15 years of marriage reduced to occasional gifts and empty rooms. The house was too big for just the two of us. Though lately, it had been just me. Victor was always just one more business trip away. One more deal to close. One more client to meet. I'd stopped counting the nights I ate dinner alone. At 55, I'd mastered the art of solitude. The country club ladies thought I had the perfect life. Successful husband, beautiful home, no financial worries. They didn't see the quiet desperation in my smile. Or maybe they had their own desperate smiles to hide. That's when Evan's text arrived. "Hey Margo, is the offer to stay still open?" My stepson, Victor's only child from his first marriage. I hadn't seen him since Christmas 2 years ago. Of course, I replied, maybe too quickly. Anything to fill the silence of this house. Victor had suggested it months ago, after Evan's startup failed. Let him stay in the guest room until he figures things out. But Evan had been too proud then. Now, something had changed. He arrived the next day with 2 suitcases and a laptop. Standing in our doorway, he looked different from how I remembered. Thinner, more serious. But still handsome, like his father had been at that age. "Thanks for this," he said, shifting awkwardly. "It's just temporary, I promise." I showed him to the guest room, watching him take in the space. The house felt different already. Less like a museum, more like a home. The first week was about establishing routines. Evan worked remotely, some consulting gig he'd picked up. I continued my volunteer work at the art gallery. We'd pass in the hallways, exchange polite conversation. But something was shifting, subtle as a change in the weather. I noticed things I shouldn't have. The way his t-shirt clung when he came back from running. How his laugh echoed through the empty rooms. The scent of his cologne lingering in the hallway. It was wrong, these thoughts. He was my stepson, for God's sake. But loneliness has a way of warping your perspective. The incident happened 3 weeks after he moved in. I was carrying laundry past the bathroom. The door opened suddenly, steam billowing out. And there was Evan, fresh from the shower. Water running down his chest. Nothing but air between us. Time seemed to stop. My breath caught in my throat. His eyes met mine, wide with surprise. Then embarrassment flooded both our faces. "Sorry," he grabbed for a towel. I hurried past, heart pounding. But the image stayed with me. Haunted me in quiet moments. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about that moment in the hallway. About how long it had been since someone looked at me that way. Even by accident. Victor called the next morning. "Another week in London, darling." His voice distant, distracted. I barely heard his excuses. Was already thinking about breakfast. About Evan in the kitchen, making coffee. The days developed a new rhythm. Morning coffee together before work. Evening glasses of wine on the back porch. Conversations that stretched late into the night. He told me about his failed company. About the investors who pulled out at the last minute. About feeling like a disappointment to his father. I told him about my dreams of running an art gallery. About settling for volunteering instead. About the slow death of my marriage. Things I'd never said out loud before. One night, the wine made me brave. Do you ever feel like you're just pretending? All the time, he answered. His hand brushed mine, reaching for the bottle. Electricity shot through my arm. We both pretended not to notice. But the air between us changed. Became charged with possibility. I started taking more care with my appearance. Wearing the clothes that had hung unworn in my closet. Putting on makeup even when I had nowhere to go. Telling myself it wasn't for him. Knowing I was lying. The touches started small. A hand on my shoulder as he passed. Our fingers brushing when passing coffee cups. Each contact like a spark in dry timber. I knew we were playing with fire. Knew it would destroy everything if we weren't careful. But I couldn't stop. Didn't want to stop. One evening, Victor called during dinner. Evan and I were sharing Chinese takeout. Laughing about something I can't remember now. How's Evan? Victor asked. Fine, I said, watching his son across the table. Just fine. Another lie to add to the pile. Because Evan wasn't fine. He was beautiful. And dangerous. And everything I shouldn't want. But did. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. Victor was in London, as usual. The power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Evan found candles in the kitchen. We sat in the living room, shadows dancing on the walls. Tell me about you and Dad, he said softly. How did you end up here? I told him about meeting Victor at an art auction. About whirlwind romance and grand gestures. About how love fades when you're not looking. You deserve better, he said. His voice low, intimate in the darkness. Someone who sees you. Someone who's here. I knew what he meant. Knew we were standing on the edge of something. Something that would change everything. Evan, I whispered. But he was already moving closer. His hand cupping my face. And when his lips met mine, everything I thought I knew disappeared. Replaced by need and heat and hunger. By the taste of wine on his tongue. By the feel of his hands in my hair. By the sound of thunder outside. Matching the storm in my heart. We broke apart, breathing hard. Reality crashing back like a wave. We can't, I said. But my hands were still clutching his shirt. We shouldn't, he agreed. But he didn't move away. And in that moment, between lightning strikes, between right and wrong, between what we should do and what we wanted, we chose want, chose need, chose each other, and damned the consequences. I'll continue with the next part of the story, maintaining the emotional tension and complex dynamics we've established. The guilt hit me first thing in the morning. Sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. Making everything too bright, too real. I could still feel Evan's kisses on my skin. Could still hear his whispered words in the dark. What had we done? I avoided the kitchen that morning. Couldn't face him over coffee. Couldn't trust myself not to reach for him again. But the house wasn't big enough for distance. We collided in the hallway that afternoon. His eyes dark with something that made my breath catch. Margo, he said, voice rough. We should talk about last night. But talking wasn't what either of us wanted. And when he pulled me into his room, I didn't resist. Didn't want to. The affair began like that. Stolen moments between conference calls. Quick kisses in darkened hallways. Long afternoons when we forgot the world existed. I changed my hair, started wearing red lipstick. bought silk blouses and perfume. You look different, my friend Sarah noticed at lunch. Happier. If she only knew why. Evan brought me coffee in bed every morning. Left notes in my books. Made me feel young again. Desired again. Alive again. But there was always Victor's shadow. His calls from London. His pictures on the walls. His name on my ring. I love you, Evan whispered one night. And I knew I was in too deep. Because I loved him too. Loved him in a way that terrified me. That's when the rumors started. Whispers at the country club. Sideways glances at charity events. Someone had seen us at a restaurant in the next town. Holding hands, looking too intimate. The danger should have stopped us. Should have made us careful. Instead, it made everything more intense. More desperate. More necessary. Then Brianna showed up. Evan's ex-girlfriend from San Francisco. Tall, beautiful, and 28. Standing on our doorstep with tears in her eyes. I made a mistake, she told him. I want you back. I watched from the window as they talked. Saw how young they looked together. How right. That night, Evan didn't come to my room. I lay awake, listening to their voices downstairs. Remembering suddenly how old I was. How wrong this all was. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen. Brianna's getting a hotel, he said. She wants to try again. My heart stopped. Started. Stopped again. You should, I heard myself say. She's your age. She's right for you. Don't, he reached for me. Boo. I stepped back. This was always going to end. It has to end. The words tasted like ashes. That afternoon, Victor called. I'm coming home next week, he said. For good this time. The London office is settled. I looked at my reflection in the window. At the woman I'd become. The lies I was living. That's wonderful, I said. And meant it. Because it would force an end. To this madness. This beautiful, terrible thing. Evan tried to talk to me that night. I don't want Brianna, he said. I want you. But I'd already started building walls. Go to dinner with her, I said. Give her another chance. He did. I watched him leave. Dressed up for someone else. Someone appropriate. Someone his own age. I drank 2 glasses of wine. Then called Sarah. I need to tell you something, I said. Because the secret was eating me alive. She listened without judgment. Then asked the question I'd been avoiding. What do you want, Margo? I didn't know anymore. Didn't know how to want anything else. When Evan came home that night, I pretended to be asleep. But I heard him pause outside my door. Heard his hand on the doorknob. Heard him walk away. The next day, Brianna came back. They talked in the garden. I watched them from my bedroom window. Young and beautiful in the sunlight. She kissed him. He let her. And something in me broke. Or maybe it was already broken. Had been since that first kiss in the storm. Victor called again. 3 more days, he said. I've missed you. I thought about telling him everything. About confessing my sins. About burning it all down. Instead, I said, I've missed you too. Another lie. To add to all the others. That night, Evan knocked on my door. We need to talk, he said. About everything. I let him in. Because I was weak. Because I loved him. Because I needed to know. Brianna wants me to move back to San Francisco. The words hung in the air between us. Heavy with possibility. With endings. You should go, I said. Even as my heart screamed no. It's where you belong. With someone your own age. Someone who can give you a future. He touched my face. The way he had that first night. You're what I want, he said. The only thing I want. But we both knew it wasn't that simple. Nothing ever was. Victor was coming home. Brianna was waiting. And I was trapped between love and duty. Between desire and reality. Between what I wanted and what I knew was right. The choice was made for us. By time. By circumstance. By the lives we'd chosen before we chose each other. That night, we loved each other one last time. Desperately. Completely. Knowing it was the end. In the morning, he was gone. A note on the kitchen counter. I'll always love you. 4 words that contained everything. And nothing. I crumpled it up. Threw it away. And waited for my husband to come home. Victor came home on a Thursday. Bringing London rain and expensive gifts. His kiss felt foreign on my lips. Like kissing a stranger. The house seemed different without Evan. Emptier somehow. Though it had been empty before. Victor noticed the changes in me. The new clothes, the makeup. You look wonderful, he said. Not knowing he wasn't the reason why. I tried to slip back into my old life. Like trying on a dress that no longer fit. The country club lunches. The charity committees. The perfect corporate wife. But everything had changed. Or maybe I had changed. 2 weeks after Victor's return. A letter arrived from San Francisco. My hands shook as I opened it. Dear Margo, Evan wrote. I couldn't leave things the way we did. I read it in the garden. Where he and Brianna had stood. Where everything had ended. He wrote about regret. About choices and consequences. About love that came too late. Or too soon. I burned the letter in the fireplace. Watched the words turn to ash. But they were already branded on my heart. Victor grew suspicious. Of my distant looks. Of my sleepless nights. Of the way I flinched from his touch. Is there someone else? He asked one night. The irony made me laugh. A hollow sound in our hollow marriage. No, I lied. Because the truth would destroy us all. But secrets have a way of surfacing. Like bodies in still water. Rising when you least expect them. It happened at a charity gala. Someone had too much champagne. Started talking about seeing me. With a younger man. At restaurants. In dark corners. Victor's face turned to stone. I watched his mind working. Putting pieces together. Evan's stay. My changes. Our timing. He left the gala without a word. I followed him home. To our beautiful house. With all its beautiful lies. How long? He asked. Standing in our perfect kitchen. How long were you fucking my son? The crude words shocked me. But not as much as the relief. Of finally being caught. Of not having to pretend anymore. It's over, I said. He's gone. But that wasn't enough. Would never be enough. Victor moved to the guest room. Started talking about divorce. About betrayal and family. About things that couldn't be forgiven. I didn't fight it. Didn't try to explain. Some things are beyond explanation. Beyond forgiveness. The divorce papers came in spring. When the garden Evan and I had tended bloomed without us. I signed them without reading. Accepting the consequences. Of choices made in darkness. Of love that broke all rules. Victor was generous in the settlement. Perhaps understanding more than he said. About loneliness. About neglect. About hearts that stray when left alone. I sold the house. Couldn't live with the memories. Of thunderstorms and stolen kisses. Of coffee in bed and whispered promises. Bought a small apartment in the city. Started taking art classes again. Learning to live with myself. With what I'd done. Months passé. Seasons changed. Life went on. Then one day, walking through Central Park, I saw him. Evan. Standing by the fountain. Alone. My heart stopped. Started. Stopped again. He looked older. More serious. But still beautiful. Still everything I wanted. Brianna and I didn't work out, he said. I couldn't stop thinking about you. The words I'd dreamed of hearing. And dreaded hearing. I'm not with your father anymore, I said. The words hanging between us. Like possibilities. Like promises. He took my hand. In broad daylight. No more shadows. No more secrets. We could try again, he said. The right way this time. I looked at our joined hands. At the future stretching before us. Uncertain. But possible. Yes, I said. Because sometimes love deserves a second chance. Even when it breaks all the rules. Even when it costs everything. Even when it starts in darkness. But ends in light. End.